Howdy, folks. Happy Thursday. I didn't actually waste a minute of my time yesterday watching the ESPYs. I spent. Howdy, folks. Happy Thursday. There you go.
I totally lost it.
I didn't actually waste a minute of my time yesterday. Shut it.
I'm trying.
There you go. Shut that guy up.
I lost it.
Whoever the hell he is.
I lost it.
Are you kidding me? Shut it! Shut that guy up. I'm not saying anymore. Who he is.
I lost it.
Are you kidding me? Wow, what the hell?
I'm sorry. It wouldn't show.
Oh, you finally did. Okay. I'm sorry about that, guys. If you didn't want to hear your voice, you heard it twice. Anyway, I'm not going to waste any time talking about the ESPYs because I didn't watch it. Or I'm going to waste time talking about it. I just didn't watch it. I spent time at that great family film, John Wick 3, Parabellum.
How was that?
I actually, if you like indiscriminate killing and, hey, seeing people getting cut their heads cut off and with samurai swords, it's pretty good.
If you like mediocre acting, it's great.
Well, hey, there is no acting. It's just Keanu Reeves is an action. He's become Schwarzenegger. He's an action guy.
Not even Schwarzenegger. But go ahead, move on. That's fine.
But anyway, but I have to start with the ESPYs in terms of the pre-show because this is the list of teams that were nominated for Best Team of the Year by ESPN. The college football and college basketball champions, Clemson for basketball. Oh, sorry, Clemson for football and Virginia for basketball. The Baylor women's college basketball team, the U.S. World Cup team, the Red Sox, the Raptors, and the New England Patriots. Who was left out?
Right, and I would have left out the Virginia team. Now, I'll tell you, I did watch some of the pre-show and a little bit of the ESPYs. They did have the entire Blues team on the pre-show. So they didn't ignore them. They did a good job with that. There is a great video of Ryan O'Reilly taking his tooth out because he won comeback player. So they did acknowledge hockey to some degree. The bad part is, and I don't remember the person's name, but you can go on my timeline and see it, a lot of people working the ESPYs didn't know the hockey players. So they weren't even clued in. And so these guys couldn't get into the talent lounge without them asking, who are you? We don't know who you are. You're not, that kind of thing. So it's a mixed bag with ESPN. It always is.
Anthony?
I mean, again, they don't what is it? The most hockey coverage that they have on there is what? The ESPN Plus, basically. And I think, all things considered, again, Linda Cohn does a great job with that. John Butcher-Gross, obviously, as well.
But Anthony, they're covered.
We know what it is. It's shuffled off in the side. We're basically acknowledging the existence of it, but barely. And we've known that for years, ever since ESPN has didn't make it as a part of their coverage. So until we see NHL action on ESPN again, this is how they choose to operate. So I just shrug my shoulders at it.
Yeah. I mean, their coverage was basically. I mean, the Blues won Best Comeback of the Year. Okay, fine. But their coverage of the Stanley Cup Final was Butcher-Gross and Barry Melrose standing in a closet somewhere. They don't put any effort into. I'm sorry, it's still one of the four big pro leagues.
Well, we can't say they don't put any effort because they do have reporters covering it. Besides those guys, Sarah Kaplan, Greg Wyshynski, they are out there covering, writing.
Peters with the prospects as well.
And Peters does a good job. They do have some good coverage. Yep. It's just you're right. It's not a focus.
It's the least of the four, and I understand that gets the lowest ratings of the four. I'm just saying, I think you will mark my words. In a couple years, when the NBC contract is up, and if the rumors are true that the NHL is going to diversify their footprint on television to include another package with either ESPN or Fox Sports. If it's ESPN, you will see them on SportsCenter. You will see shows. But right now, I think it's petty that they don't cover this one of the four major sports because they don't broadcast them. It is really ridiculous. But
I
anyway.
want to bring up something that's a little more under the radar, how the movie industry is trying to cash in or revive musical careers in the sense from their selling music standpoint. Okay, so we saw the Yesterday movie, and my thought was, okay, it's an interesting premise, blah, blah, blah. But clearly, I'm sure there's tons of Beatles songs in the movie, and I'm sure if I go look up the soundtrack, it's got a lot of Beatles on there, right? So that's an attempt to me to sell the Beatles catalog. Now, a more blatant attempt, there's a movie now coming out called Blinded by the Light.
Oh, Jesus.
And now this is a movie that is
it about Manfred Mann?
It is not about Manfred Mann, who actually did have the more popular version, even though it was written by Springsteen. But this is a movie that, they basically are saying is inspired by the song Blinded by the Light. And then when you go onto Instagram, they put like 5 Springsteen hits and they're like, go listen to them. Go buy the soundtrack. This is so desperate. Like why, movies aren't cheap anymore. Why in the world am I doing that? I could just listen to these songs anytime I want.
Well, yeah, I mean, okay, the biopics of Freddie Mercury, Bohemian Rhapsody.
That's different.
That's different. It was a story of him, and even the Elton John biopic. Yeah. Okay, it's about them. You have to have the music, like the Ray Charles movie, like the Johnny Cash movie. But when you're inventing premises just as vehicles for the soundtrack, it's really bad. And I won't go see this Yesterday movie because I don't like the premise, and I don't want to hear some guy who I don't know singing, songs that McCartney and Lennon and George Harrison sang. I don't need to be bothered with it. I just think right now everything is a money-making vehicle and nothing is about the art anymore, and that's really depresses me.
Mike would rather watch a movie about Lenin and Stalin for sure.
I'm a history guy, so yeah.
I would too.
Yeah, there you go.
2 history guys on the panel.
You know where my bread's buttered.
Oh, I know. Right? That's why I said it.
Hello, Hockey World. Today is Thursday, July 11th, 2019.
I'm Anthony Major from Sunrise Philly Magazine.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
And I'm Comrade Michael Agello, and this is the HockeyBuzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. Okay, we'll start here. Not a ton of news today, but just broke before the webcast started that Paul Holmgren, who has been the team president and previously to that general manager in Philadelphia, is now stepping into a senior advisor role with the Flyers, which means that Chuck Fletcher, who was named general manager after they fired Ron Hextall, is now going to be the team president. Russ, I equated this to sort of like what's happening with Sather in New York, that he's going to be, although I don't know in terms of the control of the organization, whether it's going to be the same or they're just not going to, it's just going to be a symbolic thing. But
it won't be the same, but he's senior advisor, right? Like in New York, Glenn Sather was still on stage when they drafted Capo Caco. You're still going to see Paul Holmgren. He's not going to completely disappear from the lexicon, but this is their way of giving the reins more to Chuck Fletcher. Look, I saw Jason Murtius, who I do a Stick to Hockey podcast with. He tweeted it out a long time ago, maybe as far back as March. We kind of knew it was in the air even before that. So it shouldn't really be a shock. And, to answer Sam Carchidi, because he confronted the team with it, why would the team tell any reporter their plans before they do it there when the season was still going on? There was no way they would ever do that.
Anthony.
No, I mean, in this circuit, as Russ said, this is something we had heard as far back as late February, early March, that there was going to be a change. And it made sense, obviously, bringing in the Gordon Fletcher, that he was going to be taking on a bit more of a wilder berth. My running joke always, whenever we get to the summer, we always see the Holmgren's gardening beard growing, larger and larger. It said, how much longer? And it's kind of sort of a subtext signal of, he's getting ready to kind of do things, kind of scale back a bit. In terms of what his role is, to spend more time with his family. In many ways, it's going to be kind of, while I think it's certainly more of a prominent role than, let's say, Bob Clark has had, it's a similar thing. He's basically, in this circumstance, as I hate to use the Italian phrase, he's consigliere in this case. He's, to Dave Scott, in terms of he will bring his experiences as, in the scouting world, as a previous general manager, as team president, just for a strategic overview. But at the end of the day, the reins are going to Chuck Fletcher, and that's, again, we've seen how that's built up throughout this the offseason. If you want to call it the Minnesotization of the Flyers, that's very true in this circumstance. I think it's becoming part of it. And Holmgren's a part of that too, because he's a Minnesota guy as well. So,
So how many Tom Hagen references are we going to get here? But I mean, obviously, I think that there's a power shift here. The question is how this will affect the Flyers. I mean, we've already seen the Fletcher touch with the organization, and a lot of former Wild players at the minor league level. I mean, how do you think that'll affect them going forward?
I don't think this affects anything other than what I think it does change is protection, maybe for some players that Paul Holmgren liked that other people in the organization didn't, as far as prospects. So now, and I'm not going to name names, you could probably figure it out, but now some of those prospects, you might see them get dealt or just not get the role that maybe was expected for them in the future. That wouldn't shock me.
Yeah, I would agree with Russell on that front. Is that there's if there were any sort of semi-darlings within the that Ron Hextall had or Chris Pryor had prior, they're going to have to reprove themselves in many ways this year too. If they're not moved off, they don't have that sort of scale of protection that they might have had before. And then again, if the team starts having injuries in certain spots, I could see some of the prospects. And again, where they have a pretty bountiful load right now of prospects in system that could easily be used to help them in certain areas.
All right, some signings one was rumored yesterday when we were doing the Buzzcast, and now it's confirmed, so we'll talk about that one, which was the Michael Ferland contract with the Vancouver Canucks. It ended up being a 4-year deal at $3.5 million. Now, Ferland, I think, was making less than $2 million on his deal that was from Calgary when he got traded to Carolina in the big deal last summer. Had a pretty decent year, had some injury problems. I think this is a good signing in the sense that I think he is added to that team to maybe be a little bit of a power forward / protector for Elias Pettersson if he plays on that line. But where I question, Anthony, is the 4 years. What do you think of this team?
Again, based off of Ferland's injury history, that kind of gives me a bit of – 4 years is what gives me a bit of pause. I mean, based on the fact he's gotten 40 points the last 2 seasons, a $3.5 million cap hit is market value, I would say, for a guy who gets 40 points. And again, I think the cap hit is, as I said, is a solid one. But the 4 years, to me, is the concern. I know there's some – the thing is, I think he doesn't have – expansion draft protection. I think he's got some no movement at the beginning of his contract, but it falls off by the time this Seattle's scheduled to come in. So he kind of knows as well that, he's got to perform or else he could very well be exposed in the expansion draft as well.
Russ?
Yeah, I like the deal because of what Anthony said. I feel like they didn't get in too deep money-wise. 4 years, I don't think is a big deal for him. I do think it's a big deal to have a guy like that potentially on the ice with Pettersson because the whole league cheap shot at him last year. Just imagine if he'd have played 80 games, how many points he would have had. Because, it definitely affected his season. I still think he had 66 points. I mean, this is a rookie we could have talked about having 80 points, if he was completely healthy, something around that, which would have been spectacular.
And I believe Roussel is one of their forwards is going to be out until close to. I think was it Roussel?
Yeah,
he's out. So in many ways, they need Ferland was the need in that circumstance to have that potential guy out there to help.
And I think that's a great point, Ant, because I think that's exactly why Benning jumped in on this because he knew about the injury. Because everybody in Vancouver was a little shocked, like, why? You said they weren't going to spend anymore. Yeah, until something happens. Like that's the role of a GM. I did talk about this at length last night on Vancouver radio with one Ainsley Scott. So that was fun. We talked mostly baseball, but we did talk about that for a couple
I think I know him. Now, the one thing here, according to Cap Friendly and Cap Central, The Canucks have a little over $2 million in cap space. That's not taking into consideration Roussel, who will probably go on LTIR at the beginning of the season, and that they can go 10% over. And the reason I bring that up is because Besser has not been signed to an extension. Now, I don't know whether that means they're trying to direct him towards a bridge because they don't have a lot of money tied up long term, but they in the short term they don't have a lot of flexibility. So it would make me think that they're trying to direct him more towards a short term deal.
I'd say it's a pretty good chance of that, Mike. I mean, although I would probably prefer a long term deal for a player like Besser. I think as a franchise cornerstone forward,
right?
In addition to Pettersson, they're 1A and 1B next to one another. I think overall. The long again, the bridge is the likely direction I think they're going in.
Now, the only exception,
if it's a bridge though, Mike, that's going to be a really high bridge. Even though he's had some injuries, he's potted a lot of goals.
Right, and the only exception to the possibility of a bridge is if they move somebody out, and that's possible. I mean, if you look at their roster right now. I think the Louis Eriksson contract is a boat anchor, so I don't think there's anybody taking that thing on for 3 years at $6 million. Brandon Sutter has been in and out of the lineup the last couple of years. He's got 2 more years at 4.3. I mean, are they considering buyouts possibly on these guys? Another guy is Chris Tanev, 1 year left at $4.45 million. Again, injury problems. If they retain salary on somebody like that, or maybe they buy out somebody if they go to salary arbitration. But all of a sudden now, Vancouver, who had lots of money to spend, it's now pretty tight.
Well, I want to put this in perspective too. So everybody talks about Patrick Laine in practically superstar terms. In his first 2 years, he had 134 points. Besser has 116.
Yeah,
and he's had injuries. So this is something, and he did have a few points that first year. I'm not really counting it, but it is counting, but it's only, I think, maybe 1 or 2 points. But the idea is this would be an expensive bridge. So I do think it's more likely that they probably move somebody and get him signed, because otherwise, you're spending too much on the bridge, and then you are risking, losing him if he has a 50-goal year.
Okay. There's a little bit of breaking news right now. Minor, but it's Montreal's just signed Joel Armia. 2-year deal with an AAV of $2.6 million.
Okay, and that feeds perfectly into what we're talking about is now depth forward, guys settling before arbitration. We had Alex Iafallo for the Kings signed a two-year deal at 2.42 AAV.
Yeah.
And now Armia at 2.6 and Jason Dickinson at 1.5. So you're seeing, and I think the 2-year deal for Armia is about right. I mean, $2.5 million for a guy who scores in the teens. That's about right. But what do you think of first the Iafallo signing, Anthony?
We'll start off with Iafallo again. It's an interesting thing because Russ and I kind of have had a little bit of a discussion of that last night in terms of how that will impact the Flyers' negotiations with Scott Laughton, who is scheduled for arbitration on July 30th. Now, there doesn't seem to be any indication that the Flyers are going to go all the way to July 30th. I know Dave Isaac from the Courier-Post reported the fact that the Flyer that they seem to be in the same ballpark in terms of what their deal potentially will be. But now again, some of the contracts does give you kind of a little bit of pause now, because again, you have Armia going to 2.4, I believe, for 2 years, right? 2.45.
2.4 something.
2.425. Yeah.
And he does have numbers that are similar. The one area where they may change is the role that the Flyers have envisioned for Scott Laughton versus Iafallo, who is more likely to be potentially in the third line to fourth line role. He does get power play time, although Russ makes the point of the fact that his production wasn't exactly fantastic, even though he did play power play time. So that is, you do have to take that into account. But they do, I think, see a little bit more offensive upside. The numbers are similar. It's coming down to also, I think, what the Flyers have kind of budgeted. Now you add the Armia signing. Now, Armia is interesting because of the fact that I'm looking at his numbers right now. 29 points in 79 games for Winnipeg 2 years ago. He only played 57 games last year for Montreal and had only 13 goals and 23 points. Now, Scott Lawton's put up more numbers than that last few seasons. So now that, to me, if I'm Lawton's agent, again,
you're not accepting less than 2, right? There's no way.
I believe so. So Armia is how old in this case? He's a 93 birth, so 25. So yeah, he and Lawton, he's going to be 25 going into 26 years old.
And
so
I think we'll agree on one thing. If you're his agent, would you accept less than 2 right now? I wouldn't.
No, I don't think it's going to be less than. I mean, it could be in that squeeze range. But with these two contracts, with both of these put into play, and they are in similar roles. One case, I was kind of like, maybe not. 2 now, and a guy who was actually who has less production, and he's making 2.6.
Yeah.
Now, if I'm his agent, I'm like, we're going above 2. We're looking at maybe 2, 3, 2. We're going to go up close to a follows number potentially in this case.
You need to
very interesting.
Apologize to me.
That makes things very interesting for Philadelphia's negotiation now.
I demand a public apology then for last night.
Okay, now we have evidence here of 2 players, not just one, Russ.
Oh.
Had more ice time and was given power play time. Last night I was in the rights. Now that you've got 2 examples, I will concede ground here to you. You happy? Thank you. Good. Next week, if you got not that busy, maybe I'll buy a grilled cheese sandwich.
Hey, there we go. That's a perfect. I love that.
Now, the other name I mentioned was Dickinson, and this is the thing. You look at Dickinson's NHL career. He's played. He split time between Texas and the Dallas Stars the last 3 years until this year. He played 67 games with Dallas. Didn't go to the minors. He only had 5 career points before this year. This year in 67 games had 22 points, had a decent playoff, 3 goals in 13 games. But this is a guy who's put up one decent year, and the decent year is 6 goals, and he gets $1.5 million for 2 years. So
there's other things that Dickinson does on the ice, though. There are, and he will get more goals if he gets more opportunity. Right. I think they know that too. He's a guy that's fast. He's a guy that plays hard. He's a guy that occasionally hits. And so, like right now, everybody's looking for like Tom Wilson light.
Right.
And Jason Dickinson can possibly play that role. Yeah. So I think they're paying him based on that, and I think it's a good move. I actually do, because he's one of those guys that it's taken a little while, but we're starting to see decent play out of him. Yeah,
he's 24 years old, and he's 6'2" and 200 pounds. So, yeah, I think the Tom Wilson comparative is apt. So, now
I do want to say something about Armia, though.
Go ahead.
For Montreal, I thought Montreal was done, but I guess because they were able to get a guy like Armia, it helps your penalty kill. He does have some size, and he is a guy that has been getting better over time, too. He's never going to be what people projected him to be, and even someone like me thought he might be years ago. But you know what? He's a decent NHLer.
Right. When he was drafted with Buffalo and he didn't pan out before the trade, because he was traded as part of the Evander Kane Bogosian deal.
Right.
And he was considered a throw-in in that deal.
Yes.
He was considered a bust in Buffalo, and then he established his career as a third line guy, a guy with size who has some abilities. He has speed for a big guy, and I think he's a good role player. So I mean, this is a decent amount for a good role player who's going to score probably in the 12 to 15 goal range. It's not out of the ordinary for him to get that kind of amount. So and I guess they liked his influence on Kotkaniemi. That was one of the reasons they brought him in, was to be a fellow countryman with Kotkaniemi who could help him out. So okay, couple things here. One, very interesting, that there was an interview with Joffrey Lupul, former Leaf Joffrey Lupul, on the Spitting Chicklets podcast, and he, for the first time, really discussed his exodus from Toronto, his exodus to Robidas Island, and I'll quote here. My contract at that point, meaning when he was put on the injured list, I think this is 2016, exceeded my production on the ice. I was hurt a lot. It was always something, my back, my groin. I couldn't keep myself healthy. I had lost confidence, not in my ability or skill set, but confidence in being able to stay healthy and make it through a game. I feel like blank today. Is there a chance I'm going to blow out my back or something? So the Leafs didn't necessarily want me back on the team that year, and they made that pretty clear. But if I had full confidence in my body, I'm sure I would have put up a big fight and been like, hey, I don't want to do this. Russ, I think he's still making excuses. I think he thought he could play. And I was there at the opening of training camp when Nazem Kadri, now an ex-Leaf, said Joffrey is healthy. He feels great. He's looking forward to the season. And then an hour later, Lou Lamoriello comes up and says he didn't pass his physical and he won't be with the team.
Yeah, there was a time back in 2009 where I believe I may have tweeted about it, but I definitely saw it. I was watching an episode of Sober House, and that was a reality show that was on VH1.
Oh, my God.
And that was with Dr. Drew.
We need to have the full vivid picture of what Russell was doing at the time.
Well, hold on.
A bowl of popcorn.
Right. Hold on, because all of a sudden they showed a party at a former NHL enforcer's house in Los Angeles. And who do I see at the party? Joffrey Lupul. Plain and simple on camera. And I think Richards may have been there too. And so Joffrey Lupul has never really admitted that his nightlife helped hurt the rest of his career. And until he does that, I don't believe anything he says.
And that's the other thing. And I'm not going to go into specifics because I've heard things, but I have no way of proving them.
Right.
He was a destructive and distracting influence on the Leafs at that point, and I think, on a couple players, and I think they didn't want him anywhere near that young group that they were bringing in, and that's why I think, on top of the fact that he couldn't stay healthy, that they wanted him to keep him as far away from that team as possible. And they're, honestly, he got paid in full. They just said, we're not. I think the undercurrent of the story was, we don't want you around our team anymore. And that he, other than that one little mouth up that he did on Instagram that he pulled down pretty quickly afterward, he really didn't say too much. So, I mean, it's all in the past now. But see, that's the thing that with some of these teams, with some of these players who are in bad contracts that they're paying too much, that are starting to fall off, they're going to find excuses to put them on LTIR or not have them around the team anymore.
Yeah, I go back to the first Young Stars game. The MVP of that, I think it was the first one, was Joffrey Lupul. Yeah. And I was in the locker room and I interviewed him, and I believe he was an Anaheim prospect at the time.
Yeah.
Amazingly skilled, could skate like better than a lot of guys in the league, a ton of talent. And unfortunately, I do think injuries and those other things that we were talking about took a toll on his career. And it's a shame.
Actually, the funny thing is, Russ, when he was traded, and I think it was 2011 or 2012, when he was traded to the Leafs in a deal that sent Francois Beauchemin back to Anaheim, he was the money dump. It was Jake Gardner coming. He was the guy who he had back surgery. He was like they didn't think there was a possibility his career was going to be over with. He was the salary dump as part of that deal, and then his back got better, and then he put up a couple good years playing with Kessel in Toronto. But then, the injuries caught up to him. So it's an interesting story. And, like I said, I mean, we've seen other stories where players come up with certain things at the end of their career so they don't have to count against the cap. And this is one example of that. Another thing, I saw this and just wanted to mention this. The famous John Scott, Phil Kessel event in 2013 where Scott tried to attack Phil Kessel. Scott did a video on YouTube about this, and it's funny because apparently it had nothing to do with Kessel. It had to do with the fact that a Leafs player, an enforcer named Jamie Devane, who played briefly for them, got into a fight with a Sabre player who was a smaller player, broke his jaw, and John Scott and Randy Carlyle had a confrontation, one on the ice, one off the ice. and Scott essentially said, I didn't usually get worked up, but I decided I was going to beat the crap out of the next guy who lined up against me. And Carlisle put out the number one line, the skill line, and Scott told Kessel before he jumped him, he says, I'm gonna drop you. And Kessel's like, what? And then Kessel, he dropped his gloves and Kessel started slashing at his legs. So it was interesting to have sort of an inside perspective of what exactly happened. I actually think, because I was at one of those games, they played back to back against the Sabres. The night before, Paul Ranger took a penalty shot and did a kick shot with his leg. The shootout went like 15 rounds or something like that, and he did this trick thing where he used his skate to kick the shot, and Jonas Enroth was the goaltender, and Enroth, as Ranger went by, slashed him. I thought that there was a possibility that this was sort of because it was an unsportsmanlike thing to do, that this was a continuation of that, and it ended up in getting David Clarkson suspended for 10 games, and basically I think the beginning of the ruining of his career, because he never recovered from that 10-game suspension.
I'm going to tell you, I don't respect John Scott, because why Phil Kessel? Phil Kessel has never had a fight in his life.
Well, he said anybody. It could have been.
I know, but it's just why? Why that mentality? Wait until their guy goes on the ice and fight that guy. Why did it have to be anybody?
Right. I agree.
That's the part I don't get. John Scott was 6'8". Again, I used to get mad at Eric Lindros when he was on the Flyers and he would check Theo Fleury first check of the game in the corner. It's like, why Theo Fleury? There's so many other guys. Some guys do these things, and it just angers me, and it angers me that John Scott did that.
All right, a couple little news and notes here, and I also there's an article in The Athletic I want to talk about. Report from the Arizona Republic: the season tickets have increased by 600% since the trade for Phil Kessel.
I love these numbers because 600.
So what does that mean? So what does that mean? It went up from 10 to 60?
Yeah, I mean, if they went up 200 season tickets more, that would probably make it 600%. That's the reality.
I mean, honestly, and the article points out, it says, a new building is a must. Gee, how long have we heard that? I mean, this is Groundhog Day. We keep talking about the same friggin' thing when it comes to the Arizona Coyotes. How long is it going to be?
Back to the Jeremy Roenick era. That building's not good enough. Well, then they went, and then this building's not good enough. And you know what? I am getting tired of hearing about this in Arizona, because at some point, no building is going to be good enough in Arizona. Because every time you bring up a different building that they played in, I think it's probably 2 different buildings, maybe even 3, but definitely 2, you hear the same excuse. At some point, you have to look at the situation and say, it's not working out. It's just not going to work.
Anthony?
I mean, I often have mixed feelings in terms of Arizona, because I know there is a fan base there, as small, as limited as it may be, that really does love having that team there.
And
I'll agree with Russ and say it is getting tiring, where it seems to be the same pattern.
I appreciate those hardcore fans.
It feels like almost an annual occurrence,
right?
What's the latest crisis in Arizona?
And it's okay. I've been to that arena. It's not a bad building. It's in the wrong place. It's like
far away from where it needs to be.
Right, well, it's in Glendale. It's completely on the opposite side of where probably most of the hockey fan base is, which is Phoenix and Scottsdale. It's on the other. It takes you 45 minutes to an hour to get there from Scottsdale.
America West Arena, where they actually had decent crowds there,
right?
When they first moved there, because that's where the fan base is at. But the problem is America West is the Barclays before Barclays for hockey.
Yeah. Right. And the Suns want no part of sharing a building with the Coyotes. So,
right.
I mean, unless they get up and the whole Arizona State thing fell apart, the only thing I can say is if this doesn't work in a couple years, I mean, and the the fact that a billionaire bought it now, I think he'll give it a fair interval. But if they don't get a building built, that Houston is waiting, and we heard about.
You got Tillman Fertitta waiting. He wants another team.
Just think about this: Arizona State University was in the regionals for NCAA hockey. They've made it all that way. They have the worst rink in NCAA hockey. There's a lot of money at Arizona University, mainly for football, I'm sure. But now that their hockey program is becoming prominent, basketball too. You're right. But now that they're becoming prominent in hockey, they can't even get a new rink. Think about that.
Yeah.
There's trouble building hockey rinks there. That's just the way it is. Professional hockey rinks. Clearly, if you went and built, a practice rink or something, you could make that work because there's a lot of people that play hockey. I get it. But look, and I get that the TV audience is big. But at some point, the NHL has to give up on the TV audience. They do.
Yeah, and it would be if they move to Houston. Houston is a top 10 market as well as Phoenix is, so there wouldn't be any drop off there. And I know that that's a consideration when they're talking about TV contracts in the next couple of years, and that might be the reason why they want to stay in Phoenix at least past that. So,
and I would add to the mix as well because I think we may see a little more of that flexibility now to move elsewhere. Now that you at least have one outpost in Vegas now that has proven itself to be successful.
Sure.
You have that area of the country kind of tied in now with Vegas. So that's why I think there may be a bit more flexibility and room for Arizona to move just from the league perspective of being in that area.
Well, here's one more thing, and this is real data, right? In 2016, and we'll get more data down the road, but in 2016, the average age of the entire state was 38 years old. That's the average age. That is not the demographic for hockey fans these days, especially newer hockey fans.
Right. Yeah, it's older.
No, it's younger, Mike. Actually, the NHL skews
in the Northeast, it's older. I know that
the Northeast it might be older, but the NHL skews kind of young now when they get new fans. You're talking about the older fans,
right? I mean,
new fans there
in Buffalo, and I know in Toronto, the younger fans are more NBA fans than they are NHL fans. Now that may be different in different markets, but okay. There was an interesting article in The Athletic. Dom Lucian wrote about the 10 worst contracts out there. Now he eliminated guys on LTIR because that I think you
don't get the Kessler deal in that sort.
Right, exactly. But here's a list of the 10, and we can debate this for a few minutes.
Number one is that's an easy one.
Well, number one is Brent Seabrook.
Yeah,
and that's that. I mean, that was a bad contract the minute it was signed. I don't understand what they were doing, whether it was just paying for past glory, but it's a mistake. 5 years left at almost $7 million. Now, this one I don't agree with. He's got Drew Doughty as the second worst, and I get the fact that
conversation going like what we're having right now, because you're looking at it and saying if you look at Doughty's past history, and Dom I think acknowledges that as well in the article, the fact that it is kind of based off of one really bad year last season. Right. So in that respect, he does say that. But if it becomes the pattern this year, then year two, all of a sudden, I think it does. But if Doughty rebounds, then that's a bit high. That's a bit high.
Russ, I don't think it's the worst contract on the team. You could make a case that Kopitar's contract is worse.
Yeah, Kopitar's contract's worse because he's not a fast skater. Doughty will always be a fast skater. Doughty will always put minutes on the ice. He'll always be in the top 5 minutes of any defenseman. It looks bad, the contract, because the team is bad. That's not Doughty's fault.
Right. Now, number 3, he has Kyle Oposo. And I have to say that free agent year could be the worst free agent year.
2016?
Yeah. I mean, it's
Lucic,
Eriksson, for Franz Nielsen in Detroit, Oposo. I mean, Backus. I mean, all of them are boat anchors. They're all terrible. I mean, don't get me wrong. Oposo is still effective, but he's not $6 million effective. And more than likely, with all the additions that Buffalo has made in the offseason, Oposo is going to be on a third line. You're paying $6 million for another 4 years for a third liner who probably will score less than 20 goals.
Okay, but I'm going to go out on a limb. Like I don't think any of us thought that the Backes contract was good. We all looked at that and said, what are they doing? Makes no sense. He probably won't even stay at center. We all were saying that.
Right.
Okposo, even if he had that first year was going to be an off year, we didn't know he was going to have the health problem he did. That was not hockey related. Yeah. That has certainly sapped whatever was left of him. So I can't say it in the same vein as, let's say, David Backes because of that.
There are truly.
It's not great due to circumstance. It's a hindsight 2020. This is a bad deal. Now it is. At the time, it wasn't. Whereas Backes was blatant to say that that was way too much for what
Now again, this one is based on one bad year. Although he played better in the playoffs, but at number 4 he has Marc-Edouard Vlasic, who has 7 more years at $7 million per. And the thing is, Vlasic is not an offensive defenseman. He's more of a shutdown guy. So paying him that much, I think if it was an offensive defenseman, you could live with it because you're going to get production. In this instance, if he's slowing down, his effectiveness as a shutdown guy is lessened.
I think that's fair.
Yeah, fifth he had Milan Lucic, disaster. And
I think he's higher than 5th, honestly.
I think he should be probably number 2.
Yeah,
I would have. Yeah, if I was doing a ranked order, I think Doughty, and I don't want to say this in terms of Dom because I think Dom does a good job, obviously, with his rankings, everything with the Athletic. But I wonder whether or not you put Doughty up higher because it gets the conversation flowing.
Well, he said it was a spicy take, so I'll give.
That means it's is that press it to that we knew, much like Backes, the minute that contract was signed, everybody said the same thing. Where it's like, it might work for a year at most. And then the likelihood of it falling off a cliff was pretty high.
We'll do one more, and then I know you have to go, Anthony. Now, Russ, this one you've mentioned this as a bad contract, and he puts Mike Matheson for Florida at number 6. Not the amount, 4.875 per year, but 7 more years.
Because again, this was a situation where the organization overvalued what he was. And so they thought they were getting a bargain. They thought, to be fair, what they were saying is they thought they were getting the next Duncan Keith.
Right.
And he's not. And so because he's not, it's not a great contract.
Now, Anthony, just a parting shot here. This guy's not on the list, but you know him intimately. I think Voracek should be in the top 10.
In terms of production driver, in terms of the fact that he's a good possession forward, still puts up numbers. The thing is, if you're looking at the overall impact on the Flyers' fortunes of late, it hasn't been great. I think it has I still think he is a productive forward. Is
sure.
Probably more than in the next few years into what you're likely going to get out of it? Yes. Would I have put it on the list? I would have possibly put it in as a potential low-down honorable mention. I don't think it would have made the list.
Yeah, I'm talking bang for the buck here. I mean, he's making over 8, and he's not performing as an 8.6 guy.
And who's that for?
Voracek.
Yeah, there's no question. I mean, he still gets points though, and we can't.
Right, and the production drivers are still pretty good.
Yeah, I can probably find a worse contract. He's just not tradable because of that contract.
They thought they were getting I don't want to say a Yager sort of situation here, but I think they thought that his way he plays would age well.
Right.
And it's kind of weird. Again, they've also flopped him to different wings based on different circumstances. There's a lot of differences in terms of where, for a long time it was, the envisioning of him and Giroux obviously is a long-standing partnership. Now they're on separate lines.
Right.
He doesn't, and you add to the fact that he had an inconsistent center situation at second line.
Right.
You were hoping that Nolan Patrick was going to be able to offensively produce in year 2. He didn't, so there's a constant flux there. So I think with Hayes being there at least consistently, or Patrick taking that next step, the value in Voracek will potentially go up.
I think that's fair. Also, just because I want Anthony to hear it, Mike, as of a few years ago, like 2016, the NHL had the third youngest audience of all the major sports.
Okay. All right, Anthony. We'll finish out the list and
Yep.
talk to you.
All right, gentlemen.
See ya.
Take care.
Well, those young people aren't in Toronto.
No, but I'm saying they are in other areas.
No,
If you think about it, if you're Arizona, you have to pull in young people. You're not getting the retirees to come to hockey.
Right. Finishing off the list, I don't agree with this one. Cam Fowler, 7 more years at $6.5 million. $6.5 million is not onerous in this.
No, and the way he skates and gets the puck out of the zone, come on, man.
Yeah, I think he's a good defenseman, and I think he's 27. So. Yeah, I mean, can he be good into his mid-30s? Yeah, I think that he's the type of defenseman who can be good at age 33 or 34. Louis Eriksson is an unmitigated,
no question,
disaster for the Canucks. Bobby Ryan at 7.25 for another 3 years.
It should be higher, yeah.
Yeah, I think it actually should be higher. I mean, the only saving grace here is the 3 years. Maybe after this year they buy him out because they have so much cap space, or they can find somebody if he has a good year to take him in a trade.
Yeah.
And technically, this guy was on LTIR for most of the year last year, so it should apply to the no LTIR rule. But Andrew Ladd for 4 more years at $5.5 million.
That's horrible.
That was a disaster at the minute he was signed.
Yeah, I mean, why isn't Johnny Boychuk's contract in there?
Probably because it's only 2 years. I think he's looking at term here.
Oh, okay, if he's looking just at term, but when's the last time Boychuk's been good?
2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah.
So
I mean, that's fine.
We'll take some questions in the chat here to finish off, but I was looking through in terms of bad cap hit or worse contracts, and up until this year, up until last year, I would have said Krejci at 7.25 with the Bruins, but he's had 2 pretty good years, so I can't really rip on him too much. I actually think that with the drop off, Keith is almost as bad as Seabrook. He's at 5.5 for 4 more years.
Not even the main power play guy anymore.
Right. He's at 5.5 for another 4 more years, and you have to factor in the cap recapture. So, I mean, they can't get rid of him. They can't. Maybe they can't even trade him. So, that one. How about Brandon Dubinsky for 2 more years at almost $6 million?
Yeah, it's too much money.
Franz Nielsen. I mean, there's we could go on and on.
Every GM has at least one.
Yeah. So, all right. Let's see if there are any questions in the chat.
First one from Tom, is Lawton a disappointment? Yeah, Scott Lawton is not a disappointment if you say, hey, you draft a player, you get him to the NHL. Where they took him, okay, if you want to say that's a disappointment, fine. I think what the Flyers were working off at the time was he had a great under-18s. It's at the end of the season. They fell in love with him. They went with it. Scott Lawton has gotten better as a player. His skating's never going to be what you call NHL above average. It's just about NHL average. And that's why you see what you see. But he's still a pretty good player. He's smart. He does a lot of other things. So is he a disappointment? No. But if you're going to go with by where he's drafted, fine. I'll leave that alone. Let's see. Let's see.
By the way, while you're looking here, the expected changes continue to occur in Edmonton, and Ken Holland is bringing in a lot of former Detroit Red Wings hands. Tyler Wright, former director of amateur scouting for the Red Wings, is now joining Edmonton's staff. This is according to Mark Spector.
I like Tyler Wright. I've had him on my show 2 or 3 times over the years. Very hardworking guy. That's a good ad. Good for Ken Holland to bring him over.
And another former wing scout named Archie Henderson is joining.
Too. That's you know what? Ken Holland's having an effect now. He is.
Yeah.
All right, Esmir goes, what? Kansas City, don't they still have an arena ready to go? Yeah, but they're not even filling it for the ECHL.
Right.
So they can't fill it. That was their chance. If the ECHL was going to sell out night after night after night there, then maybe the NHL would have looked at it. The only reason it was being mentioned is because Gary Bettman was friends with the guy who owns the arena, and it was an empty arena, and he knew he could put a team in there. That is the only reason that market was being mentioned.
I think it was it AEG or it's Anschutz who owns the Kings. So yeah. So let's just say this: in terms of potential markets for expansion, we'll always hear Kansas City because they have the building, but I don't think it's realistic.
I play softball with a guy from Kansas City, and he goes back all the time, and he tells me basketball is just so much more popular there. Look, even the Royals aren't as popular as they were in the 70s and 80s.
Right, and the Chiefs are probably the main thing.
Now, the Royals had a couple of moments where they had good teams, won World Series, but, otherwise, the Chiefs own that place. They do.
But it's going to be Quebec City, Houston, Milwaukee possibly, Portland possibly. But it's the top two are Quebec City and Houston.
Esmir goes, shouldn't prices be contract be on there? No. It doesn't matter if you think he's paying too much. They're paying too much for a goalie. How many jerseys do you think they sell for Carey Price in that market?
Yeah, and he
had so much money off of Carey Price, it's not even funny.
And he had a good year last year. So
he had a really good year.
I think what Dom was doing is he was basing it on the term and the year that they had last year, and that direction continued. If Price plays like he did last year for another 4 or 5 years, which goalies can play good into their mid-30s, then it's not a bad deal.
If you're Chicago, this is from Rob JK. If you're Chicago, wouldn't you rather have Puljujarvi from Edmonton over Nylander? No, I wouldn't, because Alex Nylander has already at least proved that he has certain skills that are NHL transferable. We haven't really seen it out of Puljujarvi. That's the issue, because he has been shook up all these times, and all this. We haven't seen that. At least Nylander, you can look at him and say, there's something there for sure. We have to unlock it.
And remember, contractually, Nylander has 2 more years at $863,000. Right. 333, whatever. Yeah. So he's got 2 more years on his ELC, and he's been healthy.
Yeah.
Got Puljujarvi coming off double hip surgery, and he's an RFA. So you're going to be paying him at least probably $1 million on a new deal, because they have to sign him, whoever trades for him, on a guy that you don't know who's going to be healthy. And if you base it on someone like Valery Nichushkin, who had hip surgery on one hip, he was never the same after that injury. So there's a big question. I mean, I think there are teams out there. Buffalo is a team that I think who's weak on the right side, who should be looking at a Puljujarvi. But question is when he's going to be healthy. You don't really know.
Okay. Next one is Deathskin. These are great names.
Nice name. Wow.
Patrick Laine said in Finnish during a tennis tournament that the contract talk could go long into the season. Could this hurt Winnipeg's season? We just talked about him yesterday, and that's exactly what I said. I felt like he is going to be a holdout to start the season.
If he's not open to a bridge, then this is going to be a long – because he hasn't – from the Jets' perspective, he hasn't established himself as Austin Matthews did in Toronto to the point that they're willing to give him big money on a long term. There's still questions of his consistency, of his ability to play two-way. So I think it's got to be a prove-it contract. It's got to be something that he gets paid for, but it's not going to be a ridiculous like $8 or $9 million a year type deal. And if he doesn't like that, he can, the point of view of Winnipeg is go play in the SM League or go play for Joker in the KHL. It's like, take it or leave it.
Yeah. And will it hurt Winnipeg? Sure it will. All right. Tom Dusome has an interesting one. He goes, who was better, Adam Graves or Bobby Holik? I am going to take Adam Graves because he had a 52-goal season, which Bobby Holik never got near. Now, Bobby Holik was terrific, and he would have 30-goal seasons. He was great in the crease, a really good team player, and he dressed down Stan Fischler one day when he was with the Rangers, and I still have the audio. It was fantastic. And so I love Bobby Holik. But no, Adam Graves, I think, was better.
Yeah, he was great at signing big free agent contracts with the Rangers, but that's about it.
Randy asked Line, could he be shipped out? No, they're not going to ship him out.
No, they're gonna play. They're gonna play hardball with him. I think.
Yeah, they're going to. This will go the way that Nylander went last year. That's exactly what's going to happen.
Yeah, and honestly, that is a precedent that I'm sure that the rest of the general managers in the league are not happy happened, because now everybody's going to go and play that playbook. Now, the big RFAs, the Rantanens, the McAvoys, the Provorovs. I mean, Provorov might hold out, but I think there's a better chance of them getting the long-term deal, which is what they want, and then there won't be a holdout. But it's going to be these guys in the middle. And even a guy like Marner, with the Leafs having that tight cap right now, that they're going to try to say, let's do a bridge, and and a guy like Marner might be comfortable with betting on himself, but I'm sure he wants the long-term deal, but it might not be possible.
And Be Easy asks Puljujarvi for Ho-Sang. Now, I would do that trade. Yeah. The problem is Ken Holland is not going to do that trade because he knows what's attached to Puljujarvi. And he knows he's going to have to pull in something a little more established than Ho-Sang, or he'll get killed in the market.
Puljujarvi for Dal Cole.
Right. If he did something like that, it's a little safer.
Right. Yeah, Ho-Sang is too much of a wild card. Ho-Sang would be a perfect fit for a market, because I think he's got NHL talent. If it's a market that needs to sell tickets and can play a guy who is sort of offbeat. Like if Arizona, but I mean, I don't know if Tocchet would like his game, but you know what I'm saying? It's like if they're looking to sell tickets, if they're looking to generate excitement, he's the type of player, if you give him playing time, I think you're going to generate excitement.
Yeah. Last question.
All right.
Ms. Angel asks me, and then, of course, Mike could answer it. Russ, is Madison Bumgarner the next New York Yankee? I would not want any part of him. I watched a couple of his games this year, and on one of them, they were talking about how the dirt bike accident changed his delivery, and now his velocity is down. Now, look, the guy's a great hitter, but he's going to the American League, so that's not going to help you. He's a great battler, but he is now sort of in the middle of his career, even at a young age. He's only like 29, but he's got mileage, and now his velocity is down in the American League. Those are two bad things to have.
Yeah, but they say in the last 6 weeks to 2 months, he's pitched a lot better. His rate.
Until he got hit on the elbow right before the All-Star break, and it blew up like a grapefruit. Yeah. I haven't heard what's happened after that.
I think the reason a lot of people are pointing towards Baumgartner is because I don't know if he's up after this year, but I don't think the Yankees are trading for a guy who's going to walk after 1 year.
I would take Marcus Stroman every day.
Honestly, I think that's where it's going to go, because remember, and it's funny because
they should call about Zach Wheeler. I don't know if the Mets would do it, but the Yankees should.
The Mets are cowards. They'll never trade with the Yankees because they're afraid that if the guy plays well for them, I mean, they wouldn't trade Jay Bruce for Christ's sake, so they're not going to trade Zach Wheeler. But I was listening to New York radio.
You, Mike Ogello, though, if I was the Met GM and I was amenable, would you trade Clint Frazier for Zach Wheeler?
Yes,
and I think that would be a fair trade.
Yeah. I would, and because I think the Yankees would have the resources to sign Wheeler long term. But no, on New York radio yesterday, they were saying, well, there are no pitchers out there that are difference makers before the July 31st deadline. Marcus Stroman pitched in the American League Championship Series.
He's a difference maker.
Yeah, he's from the area. If he's healthy, it would be a good move, because I don't know if Severino's coming back.
It doesn't seem like it.
It doesn't, it's like it's July 11th, and the guy hasn't pitched since February. So I think he's coming back. No, but anyway, this little baseball vignette was brought to you by, who was the question from? Esmer?
That's a good question. It was from
whoever did that. Thank you. So
Biz Angel.
Thank you, Biz Angel. Okay.
There's one more question. I guess I'll answer because we're not having a show tomorrow.
Right.
Russ, do you see Sam Steele as a 1C long-term? Does he have that ceiling? I think he's a 2C. And I think he's a really good 2C. Sam Steele just needs to get a little faster. He's got every other tool you want. but he'll do things on the ice. But I don't think he's a 1 seed. No.
And he'll get his opportunity this year because if Kessler's out for the year, I mean, Getzlaf is an aging first-line center. They'll probably want to inject some youth in that organization. I mean, Henrique might, I don't know if they're going to play him at center or play him on the wing, but, there's a youth movement going on in Anaheim, and with Eakins coming up from San Diego, he's going to play a lot of the guys that he played in San Diego because they're remaking that roster.
Now, Thomas did let us know that the Rangers signed Capo Keiko to his ELC. Somebody should call Mike Francesa and let him know that.
Oh, God. Mike didn't know about the Rangers in 1994.
Right.
So, all right. Good show. Thanks, Anthony, for being on the show. We will be back on Monday. We're going to, take a day off tomorrow because we've got some things on our schedule we can't get out of. So we'll be back on Monday, and we may have Eck back if he is back from his trip to Yellowstone Park. See if he met up with Yogi. For Russ Cohen, I'm Michael Agello. Thank you for watching, and remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.